Welcome to the show. Hope everybody had a good weekend. My weekend was notably free of social media. I'll follow up about that, a topic of stunningly high interest, actually, when I mentioned it last week. I'll follow up about that later in the show. But let's get right into what's going on and what happened over the weekend. When we have been having these conversations about the movement to impeach Donald Trump, we will inevitably sort of get to a point where someone will say Republicans aren't going to participate. Republicans won't impeach Trump, no matter what Trump says, no matter what Trump does. And that's true. I mean, whatever happens, Republicans are going to be an impediment to Donald Trump's impeachment if it is ever going to get going. And that's not really the focus of what I want to talk about today. What I want to focus in on is how that statement can be misunderstood. That claim, Republicans will be an impediment, could easily be misunderstood as what Nixon did was worse than what Trump did. So the reason that Republicans in '74 were ready to sign on to Richard Nixon's impeachment, which of course was what precipitated his resignation, and Republicans now are not willing to sign on to Donald Trump's impeachment, the difference might be misinterpreted as Trump just hasn't done stuff that's worthy of impeachment, whereas Richard Nixon did. But we've already widely debunked that notion. We actually looked at the three, I guess call them transgressions, that were part of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. And we found that between the Mueller report and all sorts of other evidence, it all points to Donald Trump having committed all three of the same transgressions. And remember that these are, number one, obstruction of the investigation into DNC headquarters being broken into. This is Richard Nixon's articles of impeachment. Violating constitutional rights of citizens and impairing the administration of justice, and failing to produce papers and things as directed by duly authorized subpoenas from Congress. Without rehashing the entire list item by item, because we did it last week, I don't want to repeat the same story. Trump has done all three of those same things that were in the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. The difference between Nixon 1974 and Trump 2019 is not the acts, it's the Republicans that are currently in elected office. There's a really good article by Richard Wolff, and not Wolff, the economist, who was my professor at UMass when I was an undergrad. Richard Wolff with an E on the end, the British journalist. He has a great article about this in The Guardian, which we're linking to from our YouTube clip for this story. Today's Republicans would not have impeached Richard Nixon either. And that's really what's sort of at the crux of the status quo in which we find ourselves. If Richard Nixon had today's Republicans, and if he also had Fox News, which would be a pretty big help, Nixon would not have had to resign because Republicans wouldn't have been about to sign on to impeachment. Nixon also, so not only did Nixon not have today's Republicans, not only did Nixon not have Fox News and the right-wing echo chamber of cable news and talk radio, Nixon also didn't have a William Barr, a professional at covering up presidential misdeeds. And I'll even go a step further. We're on the cusp of finding out even more transgressions committed by Donald Trump. Remember this stunning moment from the Barr testimony last week where Senator Kamala Harris asked a very simple question. Has Trump directed you, Mr. Attorney General, to investigate specific people? And William Barr was reduced to sort of a stuttering, bubbling buffoon asking for the question to be repeated and ultimately saying, I just don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Barr, has the President or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone?
I wouldn't.
Yes or no?
Could you repeat that question?
I will repeat it.
Yeah.
Has the President or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
The President or anybody else?
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Yeah, but I'm trying to grapple with the word suggest. I mean, there have been discussions of matters out there that they have not asked me to open an investigation, but
Perhaps they've suggested,
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
hinted,
I don't know.
inferred. You don't know. Okay.
In the 1970s, absolutely disgusting and brazen abuses of power actually kind of crossed party lines. Lawmakers on both sides said, we're Republicans, they're Democrats, or we're Democrats and they're Republicans. But abuses of power at this level cross partisanship. It's a red line of sorts, so to speak. Bad luck for Nixon, but Trump is in a very different environment. And this is actually something that the people around Trump have crafted really, really well. Trump's propagandists, whether it's Stephen Bannon early on, Stephen Miller, Roger Ailes when he was around, right? Whoever was advising Trump about how to deal with the Mueller probe from the beginning, they realized, and this is, I'm not criticizing them for this. I mean, this is their team and they ran this really well. They realized that in the 1970s, Nixon didn't have the support of the court of public opinion, and everything came from that, okay? So what the people around Trump focused on is, let's make sure the Fox News echo chamber is with us. Let's make sure we have someone in the Justice Department who can manage this from a public relations perspective. They installed William Barr. As long as the court of public opinion supports Trump, which means his base gives enough cover to Republicans, where Republicans don't have to say, damn, I kind of need to hold the guy accountable, or I'm in jeopardy for my own reelection. It gives Republicans the cover to insist that this is a witch hunt, that it's presidential harassment, whatever term you want to apply to it. And this is what you have. You can make the case that Republicans are immoral when it comes to this, and I wouldn't disagree with you. But the most important thing when the rubber meets the road is that they are amoral. They are amoral in that it's just about what can we get away with for our own personal self-preservation. They would not have impeached Richard Nixon. And that's the real difference. Not that Trump and Nixon are so drastically different in terms of their wrongdoing. In fact, there are some really good, smart legal analyses which say, sort of political legal analyses, which say that actually there's way more evidence against Donald Trump than there was against Richard Nixon for similar types of misdeeds, as I told you from the 3 articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. The difference is the Republican Party and, of course, the sort of media environment surrounding that. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm ready to have my mind changed. Would today's Republicans have impeached Richard Nixon? I think the answer is very clearly no. Today's program is sponsored in part by Blinkist.com/Pakman. If you've not already heard about Blinkist, it's amazing. It's an app for your phone, tablet, or web browser. And what they do is they take nonfiction books, popular nonfiction, critically acclaimed nonfiction. They condense the book into a 15-minute audiobook. You get all the most important information and insights from each book, but you can soak up the entire essence of the book in one sitting. I've listened to a ton of books on Blinkist. One recent one is Robert Reich's new book, The Common Good. Also Bunk by Kevin Young, useful in preparing me for the pseudoscience miniseries that we're producing. And if you are a David Pakman Show viewer or listener, you can get a 7-day free trial by going to Blinkist.com/Pakman. If you're watching on YouTube, use the link in the video description. After the free trial, if you like it, you can get the full access to thousands of condensed audiobooks for about $5 a month. That's BLINKIST.com/PAKMAN.